Hello and welcome to the Integrated Rehab and Performance Golf Podcast. My name is Dr. Nick Hitters and I am running the show here at the Integrated Rehab and Performance Center. So this week we are talking about thoracic extension and the lat length test. So for this test, this is a TPI test. It's part of that screen that we put golfers through where we get a preliminary kind of first glance look at how well are they able to actually achieve golf positions and create stability where it's needed to be a good golfer, reducing the risk of injury and improving their potential for performance on the course. Again, with TPI, it's all about can we make the person in front of us as consistent and efficient as possible in the golf swing for those two reasons mentioned earlier, injury prevention and performance training. So with the lat length test, this is looking at length of both lats to get into an overhead position as well as the thoracic or that mid-back spine to be able to extend, right? And we find that some people have limitations in one or the other and sometimes both, right? So that's what we'll talk about today. I'm going to show you a quick video of how we do the lat length test, why it's important. We're going to discuss a little bit about how we interpret the findings of that test and how at Integrated Rehab and Performance Center we go a little bit deeper. Once we have these preliminary findings, if we find that this test is showing an issue, then we go and we dive way deeper into it to figure out what exactly is going on at these different components. And then we'll go over some exercises and some mobility drills that we use to start that process of improving any mobility issues or stability issues found through or kind of identified first through this test and then found with our later more detailed specific testing, right? And that'll be the topic for today. So let's check out this video that I did quickly showing why the lats and thoracic spine are important for golf mobility and then how we actually do that lat length test. Okay, so what is the lat test? Well, TPI's or Titleist Performance Institute, their lat test looks for overhead mobility, which is assessing the extensibility of this big muscle here on the side and back, which is the lat. Okay, so we look at both sides. Now, when we do this test, we're also looking at the ability of the thoracic spine, or that mid part of the back there, to extend. So when it comes to the lat, we need to be able to get in this position here. When it comes to the thoracic spine, we need to be able to extend. Now, extension in the thoracic spine is kind of the opposite of this, where here we're doing some flexion. We have lumbar flexion and thoracic flexion and some cervical flexion. If we're going to do thoracic extension, we're doing the exact opposite. Now, it's important. A lot of times, a lot of people will hinge at that low back, and their kind of rib cage in that mid back is just kind of coming along for the ride, right? So they're getting motion here, while everything up here is staying kind of stacked. We're not getting that relative motion of the thoracic spine. So instead of just hinging through here, thoracic extension is much more subtle, but it's an extension through that part of the back like that. A lot of people are limited in that type of motion. So here I'm doing the lat test. I have a club. You can also use a broom or a PVC pipe, anything to push our low back into the wall, right? So this is telling me that I've maintained pressure at that low back. When you're placing this club, make sure it's not too high up here in the thoracic spine. Make sure it's not just down here at the hips. I want it right in the middle of that low back, that lumbar spine. Keep it nice and flat. Now here, we want to make sure that our low back's flat to the wall. We know it is because this club is being pinned there. We want to make sure our mid back is attached to the wall and then the back of our head. These are our three spots. Whatever position you need the legs to be in to get there, that's fine. As long as we got that flat low back, mid back, and the back of our head. Now from here, thumbs up towards the ceiling. Raise both at the same time and see how high you can get before either this club falls and we compensate with that hyperextension like that, or you just run out of space to move. So if you get locked up here, then you get locked up here. The goal here is to get your thumbs to touch the wall. Okay, so after doing the lat test, if I'm getting tension here towards the insertion of that lat on the humerus, I'm thinking this might be an insertional type of tightness in that part of the muscle belly of the lat. Now this doesn't rule out the thoracic spine for an extension issue, but I know to look very closely at that lat as well as that T-spine to make sure that both are working. If I'm feeling tension down here, or if my compensation is during that lat test, I feel this low back start to come off the wall, well then we're doing exactly what we talked about earlier, where we think we're getting extension in that thoracic spine, but really that thoracic spine is rigid, and we're just getting a little bit of hinging through here to mimic a hinge type motion. So instead of, when I come up, instead of my thoracic spine being able to maintain this extended position,
I compensate as I would normally do, maybe during a golf swing, and we bring this low back into a hyperextended state instead of getting that motion through here. Now I know I'm really going to look at that thoracic spine. We're going to take a very close look, as well as looking at that lat for extensibility issues. Now, why is this important for the golf swing? Well, we need the lat and we need that thoracic spine to be able to extend in these positions, especially at the top of the backswing. So as we come up through here, we need especially this side lat to be able to be extensible, to be able to stretch, to get me in this position here.
So that video did a pretty good job of explaining what we're doing in this test, what it looks like, and how we can interpret the test even a little bit. So you can imagine in the golf swing, especially with our lead side arm, when we are moving towards the backswing, we really need mobility in that shoulder joint to get into that position. Now we can test that shoulder joint specifically, and we do. We have a shoulder test for that. And then again, we can dive way deeper into whether it's the tendons, the ligaments, the muscles around there, just that joint capsule in general. Is it a more of a bony obstruction, things like that? Is it this whole shoulder complex that's stopping us? Yada, yada, yada. Lots of different things that we can go into more details on. Now, this test here, we're looking specifically, or more specifically, at the actual length of the lats to see how much are the lats playing a role in our mobility issues to get into the top of the backswing there. Especially on the lead side arm. And we can imagine a couple different things here. If we are having issues with the lat, especially as it inserts onto the arm, we might start to feel that's where the tension is coming from. That might identify itself as a field goal position. So when we're doing that lat length test, the elbows start to bend early, and they almost, the person performing the test might almost look like they're making a field goal sign, right? Both elbows start to bend a little bit, or maybe it's just one. That tells us maybe we look closer to that shoulder joint and that insertion of that lat on the in the humerus there. If instead we see that the club or whatever we're using to show the low back being flush to the wall, if we see that low back starting to arch, and then we start to think, well, maybe it's more of an origin of that lat where we're getting a lot of tension through where it's attaching on the spine. This could also indicate a thoracic spine mobility issue because, again, we have to keep the low back flat, we have to keep the mid back flat, and then we have to keep the back of our head on the wall. If we cannot maintain a extended thoracic spine, this is going to be very, very difficult for people to do, right? So it could be the lat length is an issue, the extensibility of that lat, but it could also be, and when we are having that low back shoot up, almost certainly we have to look at that thoracic spine for mobility to see. We want to learn more. We want to take a much closer look at that thoracic spine, because if that thoracic spine doesn't want to extend, we're going to compensate how we always do, which is an arch, a hyperextension of that low back. And I've talked about this in some other podcasts as well. But when that club or whatever we're using in that low back starts to fall, and we just feel our low back coming off the wall, or we see that person's low back coming off the wall, we know, well, they are trying to compensate because they can't complete the test, but they want to fake it. Maybe they don't know they're trying to fake it, but they're faking it. And they're doing that by just extending at that low back to make it look like they're still in an upright position, but in fact, their thoracic spine is not extending. Okay, so that is really, really important finding. Okay, so again, we would go into a lot more testing to really figure out what's going on. A lot of manual hand-on work would probably be started, especially really in either case, working on the thoracic spine, working on the low back, working on the shoulders, working on the lat, right? All this stuff. We'll do some adjusting to work some mobility back into that spine. If there's any pain and we're doing a rehab plan of care, we'll use some adjusting for some pain tolerance. We'll bring some more range of motion to these areas, take some pressure off them, improve pain, improve mobility performance in these areas. And then we'd also do some exercise, some mobility drills to start lengthening that lat. Now, what would be key here is actually lengthening or creating mobility back into the rib cage. Won't dive too deep into that here. There's some other podcasts that have done that, and some other media that I've put out that touches on this, right? But that would be when we're really hands-on, one-on-one in person. We're definitely starting there and looking at all these things and breathing and all things like that. But for this instance, we can start thinking about just building some extension and mobility back into that spine after we've done the hands-on stuff. Some things that you can try at home is this this next series of 3 exercises, which we'll show you now. Is the thoracic extension on foam roller drill. So what we're doing here is we are simply using a foam roller. Now we're not just rolling up and down on the spine like you typically think of a foam roller. I want you to find that spot in the lower part of that mid back. You're going to keep your feet on the floor. You're going to keep your hips on the floor, right? Your glutes on the floor. You're going to cross your arms, put them on your shoulders, or you can raise them up overhead. That's kind of that's how we kind of progress this in a little bit. But we're going to start with our feet on the ground, butt on the ground, hands crisscrossed on our shoulders like that, and then we're just going to hinge over that foam roller and go straight back. Okay, so from there we're just owning that position. Now we can kind of make it seem like we're doing a lot of extension just by dropping our head towards the floor. It's okay if you do that. Just make sure that you're focused on trying to get as much motion and extension over that foam roller as you can. Now the goal here is to take a breath in through the nose, nice and slow, make it last 5-6 seconds, and then exhale nice and slow, 5-6 seconds, maybe even 8-10 seconds. Really push every last bit of air out, and then another breath in through the nose as you maintain all that tension you built in through your rib cage and your abs on the breath out. That's how we control our rib cage in this position. Okay, that's how we really start to own that extension. Again, after that, we just roll 1 inch further down, right, bringing that foam roller an inch higher upper back, and then we hinge over that spot. We do that same sequence again. What we need to do here is we're trying to open up and really stretch those lats, but again, this is not about a super gross giant stretch on those lats. You shouldn't feel a giant tug through the lats or the back as we do this. It should be mainly just like a 2 out of 10 stretch, right? Just a little bit of a stretch on that lat as we do this, and then we're just breathing in that position. That is how we're getting the lats to lengthen, not just by fighting tension with more tension and just trying to rip those lats open. Okay, so this position, we have our hand, one hand at shoulder height, reached out and grabbing a rack. Our thumb is pointed down. From there, we just hunch our back, and then we sit down slightly. Our feet are in a staggered stance so that our opposite foot from the arm that's out in front of us is in front. Okay, so what that means is if my left arm is out grabbing the rack, my right foot is in front of my left foot in that staggered stance. From there, around the back, I sit down. I feel just a little bit of stretch there on that lat, and then I just maintain that position. And I just want to make sure that my right shoulder, in this case, my opposite side shoulder, is just a little bit lower than my left, right? It just has to be a little bit lower. Do a little bit of a crunch towards that side, and then we just breathe. Slow breath in through the nose, 6, 7, 8 seconds. Slow breath out through the mouth, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. Getting every last bit of air out, feeling your rib cage start to internally rotate and come together. You should feel your side abs and your obliques working a little bit. From there, in that position, you make sure to hold a little bit of that tension in the abs. You have a little bit of tension, just a slight bit of tension in that lat that's being worked, that's being stretched. We hold that ab tension as we breathe back in through our nose, and we just do this for 5, 6, 7, 8 full breath cycles, right? Just owning that position, hanging out there, feeling a little stretch on that lat, and then feeling that lat stretch just a little bit more as we breathe in, and then exhaling and feel a little bit out, all right? And just feeling this position as we breathe through it. Go ahead and give that a shot, and remember, it's a very technical drill. You got to make sure we get all these things correct. Okay, our last exercise is this shoulder complex stability and mobility routine. Really, so it's more than one exercise. It's actually a couple kind of movements put together. We start face down. As we lay face down and we pull our elbows off the floor and our head off the floor, right now we are in an extended position. Now we can compensate and get most of this extension coming from our low back, right? Like we would cheat in the lat test. But if we do a good job, we are trying to bias getting extension through the thoracic spine, and then it just stays there throughout these exercises. And we start working in overhead and shoulder movements and mobility and stability while we maintain this extended T-spine position. So first thing we do is arms just out to the side, and I just want you to think pulling. You can put 2.5 pound plates in your hands if you want. You can put something in your hand just for some feedback, or you can do this with just your hands. So the first movement here is arms outside. We're just bringing our scaps together, and we're just lifting our hands directly off the ground like that. So our hands are out to the sides. On either side, we're face down. We pull those hands, the back of our hands towards the ceiling. Now we're in this shoulder 90-90 position where we're making a field goal, and we're rotating, right? So we're maintaining this extended position throughout the body. We can kind of push our forehead into the ground if you'd like, and we're just rotating, keeping our elbows on the ground in this field goal position, bringing the back of our palms towards the ceiling there, holding for a second or two, owning that, and then coming back down. The third movement in the sequence is going to be kind of something similar. We're in that same field goal position, but we're bringing the whole elbow and arm off the ground towards the ceiling, just like that, bringing these scaps back together. Now, the last thing that we're going to do, now there's an example of kind of overdoing it. We want to keep that kind of spine where it is in a slightly extended position and then move around it from there. Now, the last one is we come back into that position where we raise our elbows and our hands off the ground, and then we overhead press from there. And we're just maintaining this position, holding that position, holding your hands off the ground as you work overhead and then back down and then overhead again. Fantastic series of exercises there to build upon the stuff that we previously worked on, where we're getting some mobility back, and then we start working on owning that mobility. All right, so the next step here is take it on the course. Now, if you've had any pain with any of this, you need to reach out, find someone to help you if you're not in the Nashville area. But otherwise, be happy to help, and we can take you into much detailed assessment, and we can start very precisely with some movements to really start working on the very details of what is going on with you specifically. The 3 previous exercises are good starting points in general, but we need to make sure that we are looking at you, especially if there's pain involved. Otherwise, do these progressions, right? Give them some time, a couple weeks, and then go back out to the range and try some old drills they've done in a while that you used to, that you liked. See if you can get a little bit more out of them. See if that swing drill that you've been trying that hasn't been working so well, it just doesn't feel good. See if that's starting to improve, right? See if you can get a couple more swings in before you start to get tight, right? Things like that. See how it feels on the top of your backswing now. Does it feel different? Can you get a little bit further? How can we leverage that, right? How can we use that for your performance? How can we find some drills that we can teach us and coach us through this new position that we're able to reach? Again, I'd recommend reaching out to a coach, and I can help you out there if you're in the Nashville area and are looking to find a coach or a swing coach or anything like that, or a pro. I can help you out. But otherwise, take this out of the range and see how things go, see how things feel. That is it for the podcast here for the lat length test, TPI's assessment or screen really of overhead mobility, specifically looking more towards the length and extensibility of the lat and thoracic spine extension. Thanks. Bye.